Hello ladies and gents, welcome to Mythos, a theory crafting show where we dive into the world of mythology and attempt to create a god for the game of Smite. Today we're going to take a look at Renenutet, which I do not quite think is how it's pronounced, but it's the best that I can do. She is the goddess of protection and true names, also suckling, but we're not going to be including that. She is said to be the goddess who weaved magical garments for the pharaohs in order to protect them, and at the birth of every person and god and goddess, gave them their true name. True names hold power, as it is said, and is demonstrated that Isis obtained the true name of Ra and used it against him. She is also said to be the goddess of protecting the underworld and gave death gazes and breathed fire upon people. But hey, enough history. Let's go ahead and talk about the goddess herself. As far as the appearance goes, I picture her looking a lot like the other Egyptian, well, some of the Egyptian gods, on her and Ra as the prime examples, having a animal head with a human body. This would be the head of a cobra, which is, if you go to the link down in the descriptions that says appearance, you can click on it. It'll take a second to load up, but that is how I envision her. The picture is copyrighted, and I do not want to get in trouble, but that is kind of a look. Now then, in order to create Ren, which is my shorthand name for her, I took several sources of her lore and blended them together. First, let's take a look at the passive. True name. This is an ability that is very simple. The last god to harm Ren has a debuff placed on them until a new god damages her. Now this debuff wears off after 5 seconds after someone else has hit her. So, for example, if a person in the solo lane is fighting against her and they hit her, then any damage they then cause afterwards is going to be reduced by 20%. If a jungler comes in to gank the lane, their first ability is going to do full damage, then they are going to do 20% less damage. The person who was also there, we'll say Ra for example, for 5 seconds he will also deal 20% less damage until the debuff wears off. You'll understand why I have it, and it might be a little too powerful, might need to be tweaked a little, but overall I think that it's kind of a cool idea. And I think that it will be needed. Before this next bit of the rest of the abilities, I want to point out that I am not an artist. And if you are an artist and you want to ever help me, contact me. But anyway, I'm not an artist, so please, I ask for love. Her first ability is Sacred Inferno. This ability is a mixture of AMC's Honey with Agni's Path of Flames. The ability is painted like the honey, but it is fire. So that's the big difference. The targeter might be slightly different, but you know, that's kind of how it goes. And it works very similar to AMC's honey, except that you can't move while casting it. You stand still and you breathe fire because the fire comes from her mouth, and it lays on the ground. The other part of this ability is that it reduces magical protections of the targets by a stacking percent, 3 to 15%, as can be seen on the ability card. And yeah, you can see all the scalings and how much damage I think that it should do. The scaling on this is very low, 15% of her magical power. The other additional part is that the longer an enemy god stands in it, the longer that the ability is active. So it starts at 2 seconds, and then for every 0.5 seconds someone stands in it, it increases by 0.5 seconds. Does not count toward minions, only enemy gods. Now her second ability is Scorching Venom. This is a targeted ability where she spits venom at somebody, and then if it hits them, it deals damage as shown on the card with a 25% magical power scaling, and this damage is done over 2 seconds. Then, if she misses though, the ability puts a pull on the ground that will slow anyone that walks into it. If her Scorching Inferno goes over the pulls, it will deal extra damage, half of what Scorching Venom would normally deal if they run through it. There can be 3 pulls on the ground at one time, and they last for probably a minute, but maybe 2 minutes, depending on how things would work. This is her main harass ability, so she would be constantly spitting these at people, or if she plans on going in for big damage, she would purposely miss and place them around. While the pools themselves do not stack the damage, she can lay them out in a way that people can run through multiple pools. And if you spit one on top of another, the first one will just completely disappear. Ren's third ability is Holy Wrappings. This one comes from her ability to create protective materials, clothing and whatnot, for the pharaohs. She can also duplicate this for herself and others. If she targets somebody, they will gain a damage reduction for 4 seconds, and then after the duration, they will be healed for how many ever points have been put into this. Healing probably will be adjusted or need to be adjusted. 80% magical power probably adjusted as well. This is a heal over time, so it's 3 seconds. So if you are running abilities or items that reduce healing, it will reduce over. To go with this ability, there's a passive attached to it that increases her MP5 and spell power as you put points into it. These only apply when it's off cooldown. If you have used this ability and put it on cooldown, you no longer get the extra MP5 and spell power. For her fourth ability, I don't have a very good name. I was gonna go with Death's Gaze, but then I believe that's the same as Anubis, so I went with Death Stare, which is not very awesome. And needs a new name, but for now we are going with it. She basically gazes at her opponents. If they are facing her, they are stunned. There's a 0.5 second time to wind up, so she would kind of raise up and I guess like stare at people. So 0.5 seconds to cast it. She can be stunned out of it, however, it does not put it on cooldown. You just merely stun her out of it. If you are stunned, you take full damage, which is at a max of 900 plus 50% over 3 seconds. If you turn away, then you take half the damage and you're slowed for 4 seconds instead. The thought process behind this is it's a fairly high damaging dot, and she's mostly dot. It can be healed through though, so you're not guaranteed to die from it. But when you mix it with all her other dots, it would probably be quite potent. Okay, lastly, to wrap this video up, I just kind of want to go over the stats and the stat lines and why I said her passive will be needed. If we look at the stats that are on the card right now, you'll see that she has a fairly high base health and fairly low mana and gains very. However, she does have a medium between her actual magic protections and physical protection, as she will be in melee, which is why you'll notice the range of 12. She has an assassin's movement speed, but she is in fact a maid. Her attack speed is fairly quick, but not as quick as some. And let's talk about her melee progression. This is where the goddess becomes a little bit interesting in my opinion. She is a melee god. She has an attack progression of 1.25, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 1.5 damage and swing speed. The first and last hits hit all enemies within melee range, so it is a big cleave. This is probably odd. I don't know, like this probably won't go through, but I like the concept of melee magical maid. You see it with Freya, but most of her stuff is ranged, and she's really the only magical god besides tanks who do magical damage. So it's a concept that isn't very well put in, or isn't put in at all, but it's one that I like, so I went with it. And she also has 30% magical power scaling on auto attacks instead of the normal 20%. And she moves as fast as an assassin, as I said a second ago. So here is the last bit that we can talk about. She is a melee magical. She is a mage. She has the pros of being high healing and high defense with medium area damage and fairly good single target abilities. Cons are she has no real escape. She's not CC immune during her ultimate, so that means that she can be stunned out of the windup. She's designed mainly for the mid or solo lane. If you have any questions or want to put forth any knowledge of your own into this, feel free to post down below. Don't forget to throw a like on the video. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. I'll try to do more of these as I get time. They are quite lengthy and take a lot of brainy work to try to make it somewhat balanced. Anyway, guys, I thank you for watching. I love you, and I think you should have a wonderful day.